Welcome back to the Peristyle Podcast. I am your host, Chris Trevino, and I'm joined here by Triple Double as we continue to knock off our spring positional previews. We started with quarterbacks. Now we're moving on to the running back position. But very quickly, before we get into those running backs, I just want to say a quick shout out to the official sponsor of the Peristyle Podcast, Trader Joe's, where you can get so many delicious snacks and treats. It's starting to warm up, Connor. And, that means more parties, that means more pool parties, and that means a lot of hosting. So if you got things going on, need to host some people, get on over to Trader Joe's, and you will get all those delicious snacks and goodies for whatever your people like. Connor, how you doing? You ready to talk about some running backs?
Yes, let's talk about what I think might be the strength of the team this season, the running backs.
Oh, okay. That's a bold statement right off the bat. I love it. Again, remember, these are quick, digestible. These are not going more than 45 minutes, and if they do, we owe you money. Connor, when I say USC running backs 2025, what are those initial thoughts?
Here are my first impression thoughts. Deep room should be the strength of the team if the offensive line holds up, or even just if the offensive line is average to okay. I really believe in these running backs, and we'll get into all the names in a second, but just off the top, it's a deep room, which is good. And I said it with Ryan a couple weeks back. We were going through the three things we're excited for about the season, three things we're nervous about. The thing I'm the most excited for is this group of running backs. I think if Lincoln Riley runs the ball more and chooses to really lean on these guys, USC, they're built like a typical Big Ten team, and that's how they should be able to win more games than last season.
I'm going to be honest with you. I did not expect you to come into the running back room pounding the table so hard for this group. I think it's a fun group too. I want to get that out of the way, but I think you are really in on this group, so I'm excited to hear your impression and your thoughts as we break down this running back room for spring. But yeah, I like this room. It's like a weird room. I don't really know what to expect, but there's a lot of talent in there. Obviously, running back isn't like a super hard position to jump straight from different levels, as we have some new faces in this room. It's not like O-line. You need some time to gel. Running back room, hey, your talent, go in there, bam, hit the hole, find some yards, pick up some yards, score some touchdowns. I think it's much simpler position, but yeah, there's a lot of talent in this room. But we got to talk about, first off the bat, the losses and the returners, and there's some pretty big losses for this room, Connor. So you got Woody Marks off to the NFL, your leading rusher from last year, and then Quentin Joyner, your number 2 from last year, who a lot of people were anointing as the starter for this season, Connor. But now he entered the portal, some NIL stuff, off to Texas Tech. How are you feeling about these losses? Because they're big ones.
Well, if you don't talk about the returners and only focus on the losses, it's not great. But luckily, USC's replenished. So losing Woody Marks, of course, hurts. He was the offensive MVP of the team, in my opinion, last season. They will really miss his catching ability out of the backfield. On paper, they don't really have anyone who fits that description right now. And then Quentin Joyner, I believe he led the Big Ten in yards per carry per eligible running backs if you met a certain threshold. So that big run against Penn State certainly boosted that up a little bit. And he did have some fumble issues, but when he got in there, the upside was really high. So tough to lose those two guys, but I do think USC is more than done enough to replace both players.
Personal note, I'm going to miss Woody Marks.
Me too.
He was so fun to be around and just a football player, and I hope he's drafted high in the upcoming NFL draft. So, Dallas, listen to me. Please draft Woody Marks. We need more running back help. Let's talk about the returners, because that is the more important aspect of this preview for spring. You have the sophomore, Brian Jackson, 188 yards, 1 touchdown last season, and then redshirt junior, Marion Peterson, 65 yards and a touchdown. Connor, not impressive numbers when you look at it from that perspective of straight stats, but Brian Jackson, Marion Peterson, interesting guys. Brian Jackson, the freshman last year, early enrollee, who kind of wowed us with his body transformation, because I had saw him during the season, or the fall season, and he came out here for California for the Elite 11 and kind of, had some bad weight. But when I saw him when he arrived in the winter, he looked like $1 million. He looked like a different guy, hit the weight room hard, and jumped Marion Peterson on that depth chart and was the third running back. Didn't get a ton of time, as you can see, 180 yards, but he did not redshirt, and he was a focal part of the offense in that Las Vegas Bowl, when him and Amarian were the only scholarship running backs left because you had Woody Marks sitting out and Quentin Joyner. So those guys stepped up in the Las Vegas Bowl. Marion Peterson, unfortunately, got hurt there in the end, so it was kind of the Brian Jackson show. But there were some flashes with Brian Jackson where he was just chewing up that Texas A&M defense. I know it wasn't their full-strength defense, but still, Brian Jackson has some potential, and so does Marion Peterson. But these are two key, interesting guys that are returning for this room.
Going to be a huge spring and fall camp for Jackson. He is going into year 2, so it's not like if it doesn't happen for him this offseason, it's the end of the world. But I think, Chris, he's put himself in a position to play next season, but the competition is going to be fierce, and we'll get into the new faces in a second. But USC did take 2 transfers, and that will make Brian Jackson's life difficult. That'll make this running back competition really interesting. He was good in the bowl game, like you said. That was a great foundation for him heading into year 2. He leapfrogged Marion Peterson, so he is firmly ahead of Peterson heading into his sophomore season. But Lincoln Riley, outside of that first year when Raleigh Brown got in the mix a little bit, has not played 3 running backs a ton. So being in the top 2 of the depth chart is huge, and Brian Jackson's going to have his work cut out for him to get to that point in this offseason here.
That's a great point. That third running back usually isn't a huge role for this offense. So, Marion, Brian Jackson kind of knife battling to get into that top 3 at the very least. And Amarion is interesting because I don't really know what his role is going to look like, because he's kind of been at the bottom since he's been on campus, and, showed us a little bit in the Las Vegas Bowl, but obviously, as I mentioned, got hurt a little bit. So kind of, tapered his expectations going into 2025. And as we'll mention with the transfer guys coming in, there's a lot of talent and competition that's going to be going on with the running back room, which makes it such a fun room to follow in the spring camp. But Marion Peterson, I don't know where he fits in. Brian Jackson, I have a little bit clearer picture. Both of those guys, though, big running backs, could be, goal line guys, 2 of the biggest running backs on this team, especially Brian Jackson, who showcased how tough he can be to bring down. But Peterson also has that ability to break tackles and, be a goal line back as well. So feels like they're kind of fighting for that same position as a potential goal line weapon or a short yardage back for this offense, which in the Big Ten, Connor, I feel like every team needs to have a guy like that. So I feel like one of these guys is going to have that role in 2025.
It certainly looks like Jackson could fill that role. When Caleb Williams was here, USC really didn't need a short yardage person because he was so effective at running the ball in those short yardage situations. It's why he had so many rushing touchdowns, even though it didn't feel like he ran the ball that much. So as this offense evolves with new players, maybe Mailbag or whoever the quarterback is, as we mentioned in our last episode, isn't as effective in short yardage situations, that would open up a spot for someone like Jackson. And at 6 feet and 230 pounds, he's a bowling ball. Even though he has lost some weight and gained some muscle, he's still a pretty big dude. So I could see him filling that void if USC opts to have a short yardage back. But Chris, I think he's really going to try to push for a starting role, be the number 2 back. It's not going to be easy, like I keep saying, but to me, like if I'm Brian Jackson, I'm going to give it the best that I possibly can because I want to do more than just be a short yardage guy.
We keep dancing around it, 2 transfers. So let's just go into new faces, because that is kind of the heart of this discussion for the running back room. USC went out and got 2 transfers. Well, technically, if you're looking at the JUCO, is that kind of like a high school? I don't know. Gerard counts it as like a high school addition for the 2025 class, but we're just going to round them up to transfers here. You got the redshirt senior, Eli Sanders, out of New Mexico, 1,700 career rushing yards, 13 touchdowns, had a kind of a breakout season last year with over 1,000 yards, 1,063 yards to be specific in 2024. And then the junior, who is a JUCO transfer, so maybe his eligibility is a little bit different with the NCAA ruling, lawsuit, whatever, where they get the extra year of eligibility. So not really sure what his true class is, but I'm listing him as a junior. Waymon Jordan Jr., excuse me, screwed all that up, out of Hutchinson in Kansas. Number 1 JUCO running back in the country by our 24/7 Sports rankings. He's still a 3-star prospect, but 1,612 yards and 21 total touchdowns as they went on to win the JUCO National Championship. He was a JUCO All-American, and I believe he won the JUCO equivalent to the Heisman. he was a dog, and one of his nicknames is the Junkyard Dog. And if you listen to Gerard Martinez talk about Waymon Jordan on our podcast, loved him. Like, it's Waymon's mother and then Gerard Martinez are the people that love him the most. I'll talk about the two freshmen in a second, but let's just focus on those two transfers right now, Connor. Both capable of starting and being the number one guy.
I hold Gerard's evaluations in very high regard, and that's why I'm so high on this room, Chris. The fact that Gerard loves Waymon Jordan so much, that means a lot to me. I watch his tape, and he's sort of that thunderous running back, and then you have Eli Sanders, who's quick as lightning, so you got the lightning thunder 1-2 punch from the transfer portal, or maybe from the high school ranks in the sense of Jordan. I don't know what to call it either. So I'm with Gerard, and I think Waymon Jordan has the chance to be really, really good for USC. He's not the typical like big bruiser. He can run physically, and he does a good job of that, but I believe he's only, 5'10" and 205 pounds. He plays bigger. When you watch his tape, you think he's bigger, but very strong. And USC, I think they got a good one with him. So he's a big reason why I'm so high on this running back room, because I think Waymon Jordan comes in, he earns the starting job in the spring or in the fall, in the fall camp, whatever you want to call it. Riley won't come out and say that he's a starting running back, but I think he's going to have a very impressive offseason. He's played 2 years of junior college, so he's coming in a little bit of an older prospect. I like that piece of it. USC's done really well with these running back transfers. I'm really high on him. I do think, though, Chris, how Riley deploys the running backs is going to look a little different. I think this room, it just creates – there's just more that you can do than maybe USC's been able to do in the past, where last season, like, it was very clearly Marks and then Joyner. I think you have more contributors, certainly 3, and then maybe if someone else has a breakout camp, you could even get to 3 or 4. So I am hoping that this running game sort of takes a step forward and is used more, and we see more guys get into the mix, where in the past it's only been a couple running backs, because I think the talent is there for this group.
How many more games did they win if they rushing more last year?
I can't say that definitively, but I certainly think they would have done better against Washington. That's the game that comes to mind for me, when it was just pass for Miller Moss early in that game, and then they started running it later on. Minnesota, they probably could have run the ball more, so maybe you flip 2 of those games, but I can't really say for sure, of course.
But my point is they needed to run the ball more in 2024, and we're hoping they run the ball more in 2025, because they have some really, really good running backs on the roster, and you're going to need that to open up opportunities for Brian Jackson and Marion Peterson, because as you stated, with Brian Jackson, he's going to come in there, try to do his best to compete for that running back 1 job, maybe they even running back 2 job, but it's tough competition. Eli Sanders, he's a veteran. He had 1,000 yards last year. A lot of people really like him. Big play guy, got some speed. And then Waymon Jordan, who kind of the overall back, like, could be a special back. Just go watch the tape. Like, it's fun tape to watch. And Gerard never gushes about players. Like, he is very even-keeled, but listening to him talk about Waymon Jordan made me super excited about Waymon Jordan, just watching him on tape, and the explosive ability and the ability to just find holes and big plays, and is a junkyard dog. He plays bigger than he is, as Connor alluded to. Like, he is a really good get for this backfield and Anthony Jones. And I think Anthony Jones has a lot of talent to work with, and it's going to be a fun problem to have getting these guys on the field. But it could be a special room. And you mentioned at the top, if Lincoln Riley runs the ball more, that's a big if. Like, we have to see that happen. But talent-wise, it's there for USC in the running back room, and I'm excited to see what it looks like in the spring. And Rob Ryan already called out.
I was going to bring that up.
Rob Ryan already called out Waymon Jordan, get that little guy from Hutch. I think he gave the elm a little bit too. So, yeah, I think we're just excited to see Waymon Jordan the most in spring based off that comment from Rob Ryan. But Eli Sanders, I'm excited to see. And I'm going to see what year 2 for Brian Jackson is like after, a really good end to the year in the Las Vegas Bowl.
I do think Eli Sanders gets kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit, because people like us have hyped up Waymon Jordan so much, and the fans are excited about him. And then with Brian Jackson, everyone saw what he did in the bowl game, and the fact that he stuck around, and not that he was ever seriously going to transfer, but that room was just so depleted, and then he was the last one left, and he made the most of his opportunity. That's a good story, so people are excited about him. But yeah, with Sanders, Chris, the breakaway speed stands out. The fact that he had so much success last season, although it wasn't at the Power 5 level or Power 4 level, it was at New Mexico. I think he can be a really important piece for USC too. So I want to make sure we talk about him enough, because Wayman Jordan, we're talking about him a lot. Brian Jackson, we're talking about him a lot. Eli Sanders could have a huge year too.
Yeah, kind of underrated right now, because he was the first guy, one of the early first commitments for USC in the transfer portal. And then USC was still recruiting Wayman Jordan, but then it kind of like they weren't together. Then he committed to UCF, and then they got him on the official visit, and then kind of bang, 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 he's committed. They got 2 running backs. So, yeah, Eli Sanders maybe a little bit under the radar right now, because with all the Wayman Jordan hype right now, but I'm still buying Wayman Jordan stock. I'm still buying Eli Sanders stock. So I think that's going to be a really fun potential 1-2 combo with some big playmakers. Like, they have legit playmaking ability. So we'll see what it looks like. I do want to mention the other 2 new faces, because there are both of USC's freshman additions from the 2025 class will be here in the spring. You have true freshman Harry Dalton III, number 52 running back out of Virginia. And then you have Riley Wormley, the number 47 running back in our rankings out of South Lake Carroll, out of Texas. I'll just say Texas. I'm blanking on the high school right now. But 2 running back additions. I don't think there's a lot of excitement around them, because they're both 3-star prospects. They're not like the sexiest pickups for USC. These are like classic Anthony Jones pickups. He likes guys that he likes, 3-star guys under the radar are going to develop him into guys. Riley Wormley had a bad knee injury in his high school senior year, so he is not expected to probably play in the spring camp at least, and he's probably going to be a redshirt for this team. And then Harry Dalton III, who I'm very excited about. Like, go put on the tape. It's fun tape. But he played dual threat quarterback for his high school. So, Connor, he needs time to develop and learn playing full-time running back, playing running back at the college position, and all that details, and not have to worry about, playing quarterback as well. So I think there's development there. But it's great that both of these guys are on campus for spring, especially Harry Dalton, who has a lot of development to get ahead of him.
Alabama really wanted Harry Dalton, and USC was able to hang on to that commitment. So that's significant to me. Kalen DeBoer, another great offensive mind. He really values what Dalton can bring. I don't think there's room on this roster for a Raleigh Brown true freshman year player, where it's someone with high upside, true freshman, who comes in and every now and then gets a few carries, a few catches out of the backfield, sort of is a spark off the sideline. I don't know if that's Dalton. Maybe it could be in the future, but like just the way the depth chart lines up, I don't know if he'll be able to get onto the field as a true freshman. But USC has a void at pass catcher from the backfield. Not a lot of these guys have much experience as receivers out of the backfield, so maybe that's a way that Dalton can force his way into the field. Seems like a big ask, but I do think there's a need there.
I think that's a good point. That freshman spark is what I'm calling it. There's not really a true freshman spark for this running back room. Harry Dalton is the closest, just because Riley is coming off that knee injury. Again, I don't know how much he's going to do in spring. I'm going to assume it's a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be full go. But we'll get more clarity on that as we move closer to spring camp. But he feels like a redshirt guy. Harry Dalton feels like a redshirt guy. But again, great that they're both on campus. But I am super high on Harry Dalton. Like, go watch the film. The guy is so physical. He seeks out defenders to run them over. He is such a fun tape to watch. So, again, needs to develop. And if there was an injury and, maybe they needed to force some action, I think Harry would be the guy, because he's the healthiest out of that group. But he also has a lot of potential, a very high ceiling for Harry Dalton. But again, you just have to make the developments. And I think Anthony Jones, obviously a very good developer of talent. I think he's going to get that out of Harry Dalton and Riley Wormley when he gets back to being full percent. But a lot of new faces for USC in spring camp with these 4 guys. And we don't have to talk about summer guys, because these are all the guys right now. All 4 guys will be here in the spring with the 2 freshmen they signed, and the transfers in Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders. Connor, let's move on to strengths and weaknesses. What is your strength right now? You called them the overall strength of the team, but what is the strength of the room specifically?
I look at the depth. I think if one of the guys, for an unfortunate reason, had to miss some time, then you're looking at a group that would still be able to produce. Say Wayman Jordan misses a game, or Eli Sanders, or Brian Jackson. I feel pretty good about those three running backs. So that, of course, is a good sign. And then, yeah, like I said off the top, I believe it's the potential strength of the team here. Of course, a lot of that depends on the offensive line and play calling. But this group, this room, is very talented. I really trust Anthony Jones's evaluations too. You look at what he's been able to do as a coach at his previous stops. He's put a lot of running backs into the NFL from Memphis and from TCU. He is a very good evaluator. And so the fact that he's put his stamp of approval on some of these guys too makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as I mentioned, I think he's going to get the most out of those guys. Likes them. I don't care if they're 3-star. I like what they do. I'm going to coach him up, and that's what he did at Memphis. So I think that's going to be a big win for USC in that regard. I have my strength as variety. I think there's a lot of different body types in here. You have some bruisers in Brian Jackson, Marion Peterson. You have a home run hitter in Eli Sanders. You have an overall back, a guy who can do a little bit of everything in Waymon Jordan, who has the highest ceiling, in my opinion. And then with those two other guys, the freshman, Harry Dalton, power back as well, but he has some explosiveness as well. And then Riley Wormley, really good pass blocker, kind of the sleeper of the sleepers, can catch out of the backfield, not a breakaway speed guy. And again, I don't know why I'm giving so much time to Riley Wormley because he's going to be injured this year, but they have a bunch of different guys in this room and a bunch of different running back types, which I like. I don't like when you have just like kind of 2 notes. You have like 4 notes in this room. So really excited about the variety that this running back room brings, especially with those 2 guys who we think would be at the top in Eli Sanders and Waymon Jordan Jr. What about your weakness?
I've already hinted at it. It's the lack of pass catchers. Last season, excuse me, although he didn't catch a touchdown, we all remember how impactful Woody Marks was in the passing game. Even when whoever the quarterback was, if they were facing pressure, they could just dump it off to Marks and let him do the rest. It's a nice way to make yourself more dangerous on offense, having a running back who can pass protect and then leak out and catch some balls. So Eli Sanders, he has the most returning production in the pass game. He caught 15 balls for 134 yards last season. Not a ton. I think Marks was more than double that. So that's a place where I want to see someone emerge. And maybe that just means the offense is going to be a little different this year because there's different personnel. But I do think it's valuable to incorporate a running back who can catch passes. Let's see who develops into that because I do think USC is going to need one.
My pick would be Waymon Jordan just because I think he can do everything. So if I had to pick a guy who would lead the room in catches this season, I'm going to pick Waymon Jordan for that. But that's a good point. Yeah, because you had basically another receiver in Woody Marks, like such a good pass catcher, like the best in the country as a running back. You had Travis Dye. You had Marshawn Lloyd who could catch a little bit. So really going to be interesting to see who they have as that pass catching guy because that's a big component of Lincoln Riley's offense for the running backs. They like the guys who can catch. So that's right. That's a question that needs to be answered. And I assume we're going to get some of those answers in the spring. I have and this isn't even like a huge one. I have level of play questions because you get Eli Sanders, who's coming from New Mexico. Now, I'm not trying to poo-poo on New Mexico, but it's not the Big Ten, And Waymon Jordan, who we think is really special. But again, there's also that question mark. He's coming from the JUCO level. Like, what does that translate to when you jump from JUCO to the Big Ten? Like, what does that look like? So I'm not necessarily like super concerned about it because I think running back is like, as I mentioned at the top, is just a position you can kind of throw somebody in regardless of the level and they can still have success. Like that's why freshman running backs can have such impact because it's the easiest position to just jump in and play well, even if you're going from high school to college. It's not like offensive line or defensive line or linebacker where there's 100 million things going on. Yeah, there's some things to learn as a running back, but it's much easier to contribute right away as a young running back out of high school. So I don't think it's that big of a concern for Eli Sanders and Waymon Jordan coming from different levels to the Big Ten. But again, I think it's something just in the back of your mind, like how is this going to translate for this room come this season? That's
a great point. And if it doesn't work out, that might end up being a reason why. So agree with you on that concern. I do have this as the strength of the team, so clearly I'm not as concerned about it as you are, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I just like that these guys are older. I do think that is a huge advantage in all of college sports. You can get the young studs who are generational, and they'll be great right away, like the Jeremiah Smiths and the Ryan Williamses of the world, but if you bring in experienced players who maybe don't have that high of a ceiling, but they've played 2 or even 3 or 4 years of college football, they can make that transition to the Big Ten. It's easier. Their bodies are more developed. They've just played more. And that, to me, is more valuable than the different level. But if it doesn't work out, I totally agree with you on that. Like the last couple transfers USC's taken at running back, they've all hit, but they all came from Division I. That was first Travis Dye from Oregon, and then Marshawn Lloyd from South Carolina, and then last year Woody Marks from Mississippi State. So not only just D1 transfers, but guys who are playing in the Power Four and the Big Two, the best of the best. So that is a concern. I hear you on that. Doesn't bother me, but we'll see.
Again, doesn't bother me that much, but just something I had to throw out there for my weakness. All right, Connor, final thoughts, which is code for what are those early starter projections? I know, haven't seen anything. I'm putting you under the gun here, like we did with quarterback. That was a little bit easier, but this one, I don't know. Where are you going? Who's going to be that one? Who's going to be that RB1? Who's going to be the RB2? And who's going to be that RB3, you think?
I got Wayman Jordan as the RB1. I have Eli Sanders as the RB2, Brian Jackson as the RB3. But I'm really hoping it's a different sort of rushing attack from USC, and we see Brian Jackson play more than the typical RB3 would. And then behind him, Marion Peterson, Harry Dalton, and Riley Wormley.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that is the 3 I have in my mind. Just looking at it on paper, I have so much stock in Waymon Jordan, so I'm going to take him as the RB1. Eli Sanders, no slouch. If Waymon Jordan easily could be the RB1 as well. I think it's like a 1A, 1B kind of situation with those two guys. And you're right. Brian Jackson, I'm hoping gets more opportunity. I hope it's more like a tiny 3-headed monster. You can fit those 3 guys in there more. The first 2 will get a lot of carries, but number 3 will get more carries than he did in 2024, because I think Brian Jackson is really talented and showed us something in that Las Vegas Bowl. Got his first career touchdown. Had that stretch where he was just running. I think it was in the third quarter or something like that. But yeah, he has a lot of talent. He can be that goal line, a short yardage back. He has that opportunity there. So I'm excited to see what he looks like in the spring, because obviously he's one of the most experienced guys in this offense, along with him and Marion Peterson. And I don't want to act like I'm not, giving some love to Marion Peterson. I just don't know where he fits. Those 2 talented guys they bring in. Brian Jackson has more momentum. He might just be the 4 again, and that's kind of where he's been since he's arrived on campus. So we'll see what it looks like. But this has to be a big spring for those 2 returners and our first look at these new guys. So I'm with you right there with those Waymon Jordan, Eli Sanders, and then Brian Jackson. Our final portion of these podcast previews have been one question solicited you guys on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. But we get one question. That's how we end. I got one from Avery Brovick, which is a cool name. I don't know if that's your real name, but can Brian Jackson be Lendell White-like, and will Riley feed the running back trio enough to allow him this opportunity? That's a very high compliment, with the Lendell White comparison, but let's say Lendell White, one of the greatest college running backs of all time. That's a lofty goal for Brian Jackson to be compared to Mr. Lendell. I'm going to say no, because I just don't know if he'll get enough of those carries. Something we literally just mentioned. Will there be enough carries for Brian Jackson? However it shakes out on the depth chart, if he's number 3, I just don't know. I feel like it might just be a situation where we get those 2 guys are kind of the main guys, and then Brian Jackson kind of as that third kind of, not distant fiddle, but just like another option you don't really have, a ton of reps for.
I get the Lendell White comparison from a play style perspective, but in terms of a top-end talent perspective, Lendell White was USC's leading rusher as a true freshman the year they won the national championship. So Brian Jackson didn't really play at all as a true freshman last season for a team that went 6-6. So it's a little bit of a different level. Of course, I get the question though. So will Riley feed him to get him enough opportunities? Sort of what I've been hinting at the whole podcast here. I hope so. And can he be Lendale White-like in the sense that he's going to run over guys? Again, I hope so, but it will just it's not going to be like Lendale White. That's just unrealistic. So maybe Wendell. Yeah, what am I trying to say? Lendale White light is what I'm trying to say, but I don't know if he'll be able to get to that level, but not many can.
Absolutely. And I understand the spirit of the question. Big guy, has some juice to him, can break tackles, physical runner. We saw in Las Vegas. Well, I keep going to Las Vegas. Well, but Brian Jackson showed some stuff in there. Can he be Lendale White light-esque? It all depends on the carries. Like if he gets I don't know what's a good number for carries, but if he gets a good chunk of carries, maybe. I just don't know. Like it's going to be a lot for a sophomore to beat out Eli Sanders and Waymon Jordan Jr. But if there's more carries given to the running back rooms, I think you could see more of that flash ability, that Lendale White light ability. No, I'm getting
I messed you up there. Sorry.
No, it's okay. But I just want to throw it to this overall question because we talk about will they run the ball more? Do you think there will be sort of a Chad Bowden effect with Lincoln Riley in terms of, hey, they ran the ball a lot at Notre Dame? Do you think there'll maybe be some, hey, we should run the ball 15 more times a game?
I don't know if Bowden has that kind of say. What do you think?
Sure. Right.
I mean, can he float it? Yeah, he can say whatever
float
he
it.
wants, but I like offense. That is Lincoln Riley. Is he going to take pointers from the general manager? Like in the NFL, does the general manager tell the coach stuff? I don't think that happens much.
That's a good point, but I'm just saying he is coming from a program where they had success running the ball 15 more times. What could 15 more times hurt? Just run the ball a little bit more. That's all I'm saying. Coming from a place where they had success, got to the national championship game running the ball. But again, that's going to be the big thing. They should be running the ball more. And we'll see if they do, in fact, run the ball more.
We will. That's the $1 million question, because I do think that if they do and they play more like a Big Ten team, stop me if you've heard me say that before, so I'll stop. I've been saying it all offseason. They're set up like a Big Ten team right now. If they play like a Big Ten team, yes, they're in that league, and a lot of teams have that similar style, but I think USC could play that way and excel, do really well. So I hope they run it more. They're set up for success to run the ball more, and I think the team's ceiling is a lot higher if they rely on the run more than they did last season.
And rant?
And rant.
Okay, Connor, on that note, we are going to wrap up running backs. Take them down for a loss, maybe? I don't know. I'm Chris. That is Connor. Check out quarterbacks and check out the rest of our offensive previews and our defensive previews